when Brexit inevitably fails, and trust me, it's well on course for failing. Indeed, many of its greatest promises have shown to be complete lies, or are just, well, quite frankly, the cracks just growing ever bigger, and it doesn't matter. The duct tape of lies just can't frankly cover it anymore. And we're getting to that point now of we're starting to see more and more Brexiteers, especially Brexit supporting newspapers, the pennies starting to drop. Going, hang on, I thought this wasn't going to happen. I thought this wasn't going to happen. And as I said, back here, one day, I will have that newspaper headline that says, "This isn't the Brexit we voted for." And I'm waiting for that day. That will be incredible, because I'm going to look forward to reading through that article and saying, "Oh, but you said this, this, and this would happen," and I'm just going to go, "We Remainers were saying this, this, and this for over years, since before and during after the referendum. You were told, you were warned this would happen, but." Especially journalists and newspapers in this area decided to go, we're not going to listen to experts or actually bring people the actual facts of what all this actually entails. We're just going to stand by the sidelines as if we're some sort of innocent bystander, as if we haven't been cheering on this complete car crash for years, and just say, golly gee, how the hell did that happen? So, today's story comes from counterpunch.org, and it is the UK's sinking Brexit ship. So, Boris Johnson and his Tory colleagues are playing a game that is doomed to fail, where there are twin threats of the COVID pandemic and Brexit are concerned. As the UK careens toward a no-deal Brexit, the message is that the economic and social disaster caused by a no-deal Brexit is really to be attributed to the pandemic, while another message is that the country will be back to normal by Christmas with regard to the pandemic, leaving the decks miraculously clear for a mighty effort to stem the calamitous no-deal Brexit. It is my strong and sincere hope, Johnson told the Downing Street press conference, that this virus will be under such a strong control that the country should see a significant return to normalcy by November. Both messages are a con, which must be surely apparent even to the self-deceiver like Johnson. It is certainly to the EU leaders. The Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, added a twist to the Brexiteers' mantra. Brexit means Brexit, by adding, and hard Brexit means hard Brexit. As has been clear all along, the EU is not going to give an inch to perfidious Albion in its divorce from the EU. It is soon to become obvious that Johnson's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, and chief medical officer, Chris Whitley, did not get Johnson's message. Within hours, both men were telling the House of Lords Science Committee that social distancing is here to stay. Whitley said, "The virus has not gone away. The measures need to continue for a long period of time." Vallance added, "The social distancing and hygiene measures will be necessary, given it is highly likely the virus would return, seeking that it was just a matter of when, not if, COVID comes back in force in several waves." The truth is that there will be no return to a pre-COVID normalcy. Without levels of contact tracing, they've never been achieved in the UK, as well as effective COVID security on public transport and so on. The current testing system, outsourced to the private companies Serico and GS4, fails to contact nearly a quarter of the people who test positive. In one town in north of England now dealing with a serious major outbreak of the virus, the testing app, touted as world-beating by Johnson, is failing to reach half of its close contacts. The UK economy was in poor shape even before COVID struck, but the economy is now on the verge of flatlining. The national output dropped by a dismal 20% in April. And although economic forecasts had predicted a 5.5% in May, the actual figure turned out to be an insipid 1.8%. The Organisation for Economic and Cooperation and Development says another major coronavirus outbreak in the UK could result in an unemployment rate of 15%. The Office for National Statistics reports that over 650,000 people have lost their jobs since lockdown began, and vacancies are at their lowest level since records began 2 decades ago. Up to 3 million UK jobs are now thought to be at risk because of unsustainable corporate debt levels, and these firms are pleading for government bailouts. The coronavirus crisis has left many in the UK businesses in a worse position to cope with a no-deal Brexit, according to the independent think tank, the Institute for Government. The Institute says that 3 out of 5 firms have not begun to prepare for the finalisation of the UK-EU separation on the 31st of December due to the continued indecision about the UK's future relationship with the EU. The Minister for Brexit, Michael Gove, has confirmed that up to 5 sites in Kent in the south of England, abutting the English Channel, will be used as Brexit border facilities, with another 7 situated elsewhere in the country. Grove has already confirmed that the purchase of a £700 million site for a Brexit border centred on a vast lorry park in Ashford, Kent, where the transport operators will have to fork out money on an hourly basis while they wait for their customs clearance. The profound irony is that Ashford, solidly pro-Tory and pro-Brexit in the 2016 EU referendum, it voted leave by a 59.4%, with Remain at 40%. Property values in Ashford are expected to crash with the construction of the vehicle park. With its ensuing traffic bottlenecks and stress it will place on local infrastructure and services. Brexiteers in Ashford are nearly thumbing nimbly through their understandably many Remainers have little sympathy for them. So much for the Brexiteer slogan of taking back control. Johnson also suffered a major political defeat this week. He's been sitting on the parliamentary report since before December 2019 election, which investigated Russian interference in the 2016 referendum and the 2019 general election. Releasing the Russia report is the task of the House Commons Select Committee, but Johnson prevented it from meeting for 7 months. When he could no longer do this, Johnson tried to influence the committee's leadership in an act of absolutely egregious executive overreach. He directed that the committee be handled by one of his former flunkies, the error-prone former minister Chris Grayling. The committee has 9 members, 5 Tory and 4 belong to the opposite parties. In something of a coup, like one of the 5 Tories, the independently minded Gillian Lewis stood against Grayling and persuaded the 4 opposition party members to vote for him. Johnson's hope was that Grayling would somehow be able to prevent the release of the Russian report, but Lewis, now the committee's chair, had already chaired his first committee meeting and obtained unanimous agreement to publish a report within a week. Johnson retaliated by having Lewis's kicked from the Parliamentary Conservative Party. Such is the state of democracy in Ukraine. So what lies ahead for us? The Thatcherite neoliberal settlement from 1970 onward was a failed attempt to deal with the breakdown of the 1945 social democratic settlement, and persisted in what it was called a managed capitalism. The current coverage of the consequences, most impossibly to anticipate the continuing pandemic as well, with an economic upheaval brought about by no-deal Brexit, could create conditions for overhauling of the 1970 give capitalism free rein Thatcherism consensus. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Labour's current Blairite leadership under Keir Starmer, having eschewed Corbyn's experiment in social democracy, is committed in doing so to help the maintenance of Thatcherism, given or take a few palliatives not so far in evidence. If the sting of a no-deal Brexit is not felt deeply by those who believe the EU is to blame for the UK's decade-long economic and social decline, and this is the anti-EU refrain, is the constant Tory message, the overturning of the Thatcherism consensus can be deferred. But the question is, for how long? History shows us that events tend to proceed at their own pace, though sometimes with great rapidity. And that's where we are. We could be looking at huge cascading crisis. We've already gone over the fact of how many companies are, after the furlough finishes, could be months away from meltdown. We are looking at massive levels of unemployment, the likes of which we haven't seen for years. We can only hope that this will put an end to Thatcherism. And I disagree with the fact that, as was stated in this, that Starmer's a Blairite. Starmer has said, let's go back to the 2017 manifesto. The manifesto that was headed by Corbyn. One that was hailed by lots of party members as being a good manifesto. And yeah, you can be upset, but as I've said to many people in Momentum, learn from this failure and prepare for next time. Keep pushing your policies. And I've said choose 4 key policies and use those policies. Push those policies. It's not the end of the world that Corbyn's now back on the backbenchers. You can still continue to get your MPs into the Labour Party and elected as MPs and to push for your policies. It's not the end of the world. It can be still achieved. You just have to convince people that that's the way to go. And Corbyn, in his last manifesto, the manifesto was so big, and yes, I was a good manifesto, but as the criticism came from everyone, well, that's far too much, to the point where it even became a joke of adding free broadband. Now, I think that is, to be honest, an actual good policy for this country. It has many upsides to it, but it just became a joke. So you need to pick 4 policies like renationalise the rail network, keep the NHS in public hands and end privatisation. Stuff like that. Stuff that is really bread and butter politics. And once you get those 4 things achieved, you can start to push forward more. But take it slowly, step at a time. You might not like that pace, but as Corbyn showed, sometimes you have to have a more slow and steady pace wins the race rather than a complete, run, skip and a jump. You might completely miss the mark. So, there you have it. So, as we always said, disaster is but 5 months away at this point, 4 months away where we are. And yeah, as I said, October is going to be interesting. October is going to be very interesting.